Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. I'm your host, Viz, and it is my honor and pleasure tonight to welcome our very special guest, Julian Richings. Julian, thank you so much for being here, and how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to meet you. I have been watching you on the screen for God knows how many years, and to actually get to meet and talk to you, it's a thrill. It's an honor. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a ton of questions for you. These first set of questions revolve around your time on Supernatural, which spanned over 5 years, but very limited episodes here and there. I gotta ask you, whenever you came back to do an episode on Supernatural, did everybody react like, hey, Julian is back? How was the reaction whenever you
It,
would pop up on that set?
it was very positive. I mean, the whole character was shaped beautifully, and I think it really hit its stride even in the first introductory
Hmm.
episode when in the pizza parlor. So by the time that the writers started to bring Death back, he was already established, and they started to have fun and noodle around the edges with little moments here and there. So it was a fun time for all of us. I always enjoyed it, and I really got the feeling that everybody else was on board too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do you prepare to bring to life the human embodiment of death? How do you do that as an actor?
Well, same with any role that you do. You take your clues from the script. In this case, that script, that first long episode in the pizza parlor with Jensen, is so well written that you just have to kind of look at it and go, okay, so what needs to be done here? There's there's a sense of a guy who is the most powerful person going, as we've established in the intro, that amazing intro with the Jen Titus music.
Yes.
So the beauty of that is that I don't have to try too hard. I don't have to walk in and go, I'm really tough and I rule the world, so you better watch yourself. It's like it's been established. So the lighter and the more deft the touch, the more intimidating it is. So there's the first thing, and then beyond that, there was in the scene there was such a human touch, a lovely, a delicious sort of mischief and an
Mm-hmm.
irony and a toying with Jensen, and the idea that there was a back and forth, almost like an uncle and his naughty little nephew,
Yep.
So
Yep.
there were all those elements to play. And I just played those elements rather than the idea that I'm the Grim Reaper and I've
Yeah.
come to get you. And thanks to Jensen being such a good actor, he really played up the fear and
Yes.
the intimidation. I didn't have to kind of muscle my way through it. So right away, we had a really good dynamic scene between two actors that was really interesting. It went beyond just this is a grim reaper with a potential victim. It was much more than that.
Ex-
So,
ab-
so again, to answer your question in short, I just took my clues from the script and allowed the other actor to help me.
Well, that sort of goes right into my next question because uh, the demeanor of how you portray death was very calm. Did you? I know you just said it was in the script, but did you add any of your own elements besides what was in the script to making him very calm? Doesn't have to pump his chest up to say, I'm the almighty death.
Yeah, I think I just draw on what comes naturally. And for me, I grew up in the UK in the 60s, and I used to watch lots of Hammer horror movies.
Ah,
Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, all those with very elegant elder gentlemen that were the embodiment of evil. But again, they never tried too hard. They were actually very aristocratic and elegant within their scheming selves. So it wasn't conscious, but inevitably I'm going to bring to the table what I'm used to and what I enjoy. So I think I drew on those influences.
and Christopher Lee, that's a perfect parallel right there, Mr. Dracula. But probably my favorite Dracula, just the calmness of him. So I could definitely see where you were going with that. Now, did you have to audition for Death, or did you get a call? Hey, we have this part. and we think you'd be perfect for it.
Well, around 6 months before I shot, I auditioned. I put myself on tape. I live in Toronto mainly. The show shoots in Vancouver. So there's no way you can do an audition in person. You put yourself on tape. My agent said, well, you got an audition for this show called Supernatural, which, to be honest with you, I'd heard of, but I wasn't that familiar with. Anyway, I read this interesting kind of monologue, and it was a monologue of a guy, one of the four horsemen, but it was pestilence.
Ah.
And I put myself on tape and I sent it away and I forgot all about it. And then 6 months later, my agent said, yeah, you got that job. Which job? The supernatural one. Oh, pestilence. No, you're not playing pestilence. You're playing death.
Ooh.
So it seems that what happened was that I think as they were trying to figure out the four horsemen, the writers had already established one storyline and had got that, and they were sending it out to as many actors as possible and seeing what came back. And from that one script, they were kind of mixing and matching and saying, that guy would be good for pestilence, that guy would be good for death, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that was the process. And
you were the perfect pick. You were the perfect pick for death.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. It certainly had a huge impact on people. I mean, I can't go down the street without people generally either offering me pizza or running or going, like, death, my God, it's death. Oh, well, so yeah.
Let me give you an example. The other day, my daughter, who's also an editor of mine, we were going through our website, and I already had your picture up as an upcoming guest. So we go to the upcoming guest list. She sees your picture. She's like, I know him. She's a big Supernatural fan. Now, Supernatural was a hugely successful show. That's an understatement. It lasted 15 seasons.
15 seasons.
15 seasons. What do you think was the secret to its success? What would you attribute it to?
I think Jensen and Jared, first of all, the two boys. I mean, they grew up on our TV screens in front of us over 15 years. They're both really good actors, and they're both really generous human beings. And I think around them was enough substance to build not just an interesting show, but an entire arc. And between them, their dynamic is also fun. They're relaxed. They're confident about who they are and with each other, with other people. And so it just grew and grew and grew. And I think people began to get them and understand the spark that they created and enjoy it. And then there's that thing where it kind of teases, it kind of titillates and scares us. But there's a moral universe in there that people like to explore and feel they're in safe hands. They're going on a slightly dangerous journey with people they really trust.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good formula, and it's worked very well.
It worked very well. Moving on from Supernatural, in 2020, you were in the film called Anything for Jackson, where you were like a Satanist who did a reverse exorcism.
Yeah.
All right. What was that? And when you read the script, what were your initial thoughts about you doing a reverse exorcism?
Well, that was the exorcism itself was just part of the premise of the movie. I think the biggest thing that appealed to me was the characterization of the two leads.
Yeah.
So Henry and Audrey are an elder couple. Henry is a doctor. They're both in their mid-60s. They have a grandchild that they've lost. They're grieving. I think we all understand loss and grief and vulnerability. And we also root for quaint older people that are clearly devoted to each other. So there's something in there. But what's so great about the script is that these two people go on a journey together that is, and they encourage each other to do things that are completely wrong. And, they're out of their depth.
Yes.
And in many ways, Henry, my character, enables his wife, Audrey, in order to make her feel less upset. And the choices that he makes in order to do that are appalling. And I think, again, that's something on a generational level that we recognize, that the older generation makes a lot of very, very bad choices, often in with the best intentions in the world. And so there's something generational about the movie that really works for this present time, for our idea of the environment, our political ideals. You know, there is a sense that a lot of the younger generation have been sold down the river a little bit. And so there's a bit of that.
Absolutely. And we're just going to be, we have so much, I want to talk about so many of your projects. So excuse me if I jump from movie to movie to movie.
No problem.
Next on the list is in 2003, you were in the very first Wrong Turn as Three Fingers. Yeah. Now, it looked like you had a lot of fun doing that role. Was it fun chasing around people? I mean, describe what that was like.
It was great. I love working with special effects artists. I grew up in a family. I'm one of three boys. Both my brothers are technically very gifted. My older brother's a set designer. My younger brother's a lighting designer. I get where designers come from. I get where an actor fits into design. And I love the horror genre because actually the actor in many ways is a moving vehicle for design.
Yeah.
Horror movies, the actors themselves sort of carry the story, but they're also carrying high concepts.
Yeah.
The character of Three Finger was one of Stan Winston's creatures. Stan Winston, the great special effects makeup artist, came up with these three characters, these cannibal hillbillies. And for me, the part of the joy of it was actually spending 4 hours in a chair, working with an artist who was working with my body and my face and creating a mask that I could use and enhance, and would introduce little things that felt right, and it felt like a very organic process.
Yeah.
So it was very cool for me to sit there, kind of listening to special effects guy talk, not just actor talk about, how's my hair, am I going gray? What's going on here? The kind of actor vanity. It's more about the effects makeup. What does it look like? What's the result? What's the rhythm of the scene? How can we light this in such a way that we get the maximum impact? What can we do? So special effects are working with lighting, are working with production design in order to maximize things. So it's a really very relaxed, very focused set, actually. And there's less drama and trauma on a horror film often than on a romantic comedy.
Yeah. Now, having throughout your career worked with practical effects as opposed to CGI, there's a big debate going on, especially within the horror community. Fans and insiders, there are a lot of fans who prefer the practical effects. Now, I've heard the story from actors when it comes to CGI, modern CGI. It's actually a lot tougher because you don't have something to physically interact with. Right. So as an actor yourself, do you have a deep respect? I think you do from what you just said, from the practical effects and the work that goes in, along with the lighting and everything else, as opposed to CGI. What are your feelings on CGI in today's modern technology?
It's a technological advancement, and it's brought us lots of opportunity. Low budget films are able to capitalize on CGI, on iPhones, on the kind of an enabling of technology. It means that you don't have to have crews of 50, 60, 70 people. So there are very good aspects to technological advances. But yes, I mean, I grew up in the old school, hands-on DIY special effects. There's a sort of a glory about being inventive and jerry-rigging stunts, jerry-rigging car crashes, doing stuff. that you certainly miss. For instance, I've been squibbed many hundreds of times. By a squib, you
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
know what I mean, where you have an electrical charge where there's a little blood bag that pops out when you're
Yep.
shot, So there's a real visceral hit when you are shot, and there is something for you as an actor to take as a momentum, and it gives you an adrenaline rush, and it gives everybody an adrenaline rush to know that there's an actor live, and there's an element of danger about what we're doing, and there's a respect mutual for everybody. With CGI, it does feel like a bit of a cheat when you're on camera and somebody says, "Well, just put your head back, do this, and then we'll do the rest."
We'll do the rest, yeah.
You feel like you're cheating, but hey, if it works in the context of what the filmmaker has in mind, that's fine. That's fine. But certainly I would not like to lose the old ways, lose the respect for those practices.
And the craft itself, like the Winstons and the Bakers and the Savinis that have crafted this and made it so great. At which point in your life do you remember becoming a big horror fan, or was it earlier in your career? Was it growing up? Where did you find your love for horror?
Well, as I said earlier, I grew up in Britain in the 60s, so Hammer horror was kind of the alternate thing that you would watch. You would hang out with your buddies, and you would watch kind of gory, slightly sexualized vampire movies, and that would be the subculture that was a bit gritty, a bit grainy, but had an imaginative license and world to it. So I've always felt attracted to that crowd. And I guess, though, that there's not one form of horror movie that I'm attracted to. The very first movie that made a huge impression on me was Night of the Hunter, directed by Charles Laughton. Directed way back in the 50s, black and white. It's sort of an expressionist film. It's the one with Robert Mitchum with love and hate tattooed on his knuckles, and Shelley Winters dying. And it's an extraordinary, terrifying movie about a fake preacher chasing children down a riverbank. And I realized that, terror in the movies can be something that is incredibly cathartic and fun. It's a fun ride. It's like stepping on a roller coaster, and you go on it, and at the end you're exhausted, and you actually hardly remember it because you're so in it moment by moment by moment on the edge of your seat. So that was kind of my inspiration, and I like movies. I don't have a preference. I don't like gore fests and splatter or creeping psychological dramas. I like all the elements.
For me personally, the gore and the blood, it's fun, but for me, character building, storytelling, something that actually scares you and leaves an impact with you, that to me is the recipe of what makes a good horror film.
I think that the thing that interests me too, I agree with you. Horror films generally look at society going wrong. It pokes away at our fears and our insecurities rather than our aspirations and our need to succeed. It's actually, oh my God, what if this went wrong? What if we took a wrong turn? What if this fell down? What if that guy over there turned out to be a menacing presence? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that it's the undercurrents of society that are represented, and our psychological fears, and that's always potent, and it's always interesting.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Now, in a film of yours that was released in 2020, The Hall, mirrors sort of like the COVID days that we've been living in for over a year now. What were your impressions? I assume the film was shot well before COVID
Yeah.
came, and then
Yeah.
this movie came out, which sort of mirrored a little bit the real life events of this horrible pandemic. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about that?
What drew me to it was that, yes, it was a what if there was an outbreak. It was our societal fear of zombies,
Yeah.
of being taken over by the other, or losing control of ourselves, of our societal order. But it examined it in such a way that it looked at it through the mirror of a personal relationship that was going wrong
Yeah.
with husband and wife and their daughter, and the trauma between the two of them was kind of reflected in the bigger world, in the corridors of the hotel. So there was a lot going on there. There was a lot of echoes. It wasn't just a, hey, we're going to do zombies crawling up the hotel hallway. There's a lot in there. And I feel that sure enough, there was something very prophetic about
Mm-hmm.
the film. I mean, they obviously anticipated the idea of a big pandemic, but it's a pandemic of isolation and not communicating as
Yeah.
much as it is a pandemic of death and fear.
Which is what we have been experiencing in real life over the last year plus, you know? So that's why I wanted to bring that up. Now, I got to get to Hannibal, okay? I loved
Right.
the show Hannibal. You were in a single episode, but it was a very memorable episode where you played the caged man.
Yeah.
Very extensive. They made you look like you literally walked out of the jungle into society. Uh,
Yeah.
what was it, first of all, working on Hannibal with Hugh Dancy, Mads, being on that set? And the second part is how extensive of work and how long did it take to make you look the way they did for that one episode?
It was pretty extensive. I mean, I had hair
Mm-hmm.
extensions. I had a fake beard. I'm the kind of guy that if you ask me to grow a beard, I'll need advance warning of about 9 to 10 months. I'm not the most hirsute guy, so there was lots of prep. But that preparation often takes place before the actual day of shooting. That was all in the creation of wigs and hair pieces. The actual makeup wasn't that extensive. It was just dirtying me up basically
Yeah.
and applying this and creating a physical person who was wretched, who had been abused and didn't feel like he belonged to society, was an outsider,
Mm-hmm.
was from, as you say, from a different place, from a different, like almost a Neanderthal place, but was vulnerable. That to me is the fun part of it. That's something that I look to with my physicality. I have a physical training, and all of my characters have a physical base. I don't just speak lines. I kind of ground myself in a place, a walk, a movement pattern, like Three Finger,
Yeah.
from Wrong Turn. So that was a fun thing to kind of inhabit this guy that was not used to living in a cage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a horrible idea, but for an actor, a very stimulating idea to try and convey.
Absolutely. Now, Hannibal was an amazing show, definitely a dark show.
Yeah.
Out of all the movies and TV shows you've done, personally, which one do you think had the darkest overtone? I guess is the best way to put it, that you've appeared in. Hannibal
Yeah.
was extremely dark, as opposed to
Yeah.
Supernatural. Supernatural, even though it dealt
Yeah.
around very dark issues, it was not in the same class as Hannibal, which was in a class of its own,
Yeah.
which made it great. What would you say was the darkest script that you had to work on?
I think I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
There's
here.
a long list.
Yeah, I think it's a surprising answer. It's a completely different form. It's also one of the funniest shows that I've ever done. You see, I think that you can have darkness and light together, and I think that that's what makes things very, very interesting. Which is why sometimes, like with Hitchcock, suspense and horror comes from a lot of humor too.
Yes.
So one of the funniest and most beautiful shows that I've been a part of is a show called Patriot on Amazon.
Yes.
It's very different. I mean, it's not within the horror genre at all. It's about CIA. It's about fathers and sons. It's all kinds of things. But there is a humanity, but there's also a darkness and a realization that sometimes we get things terribly, terribly wrong, both as parents and both as people, with our loyalties and our missions and our misplaced sense of patriotism. And so there was a darkness there that I think we shot it, I guess, 5 years ago. That reflected kind of a political unrest and agitation and upset, turmoil in the world. That is very, very dark. So it's not probably not an answer that you're expecting. Not like, it's not the most kind of obvious example, but I think within the humor and the life and the beauty, there's also a lot of pain and darkness.
I could totally see that. Now, you had a small role in Urban Legend. And did you take that role because you wanted to work with like Robert Englund, or did you love the script? It was a great movie. It was very successful. You played the janitor.
I played the red herring. Which is kind of a fun thing, and I've done it a few times where you go, that guy, he doesn't look right. He's creepy. He's sending me vibes that I'm going, it's him. He's the bad guy. Watch out for him. And in fact, as we find out, spoiler alert, but it's somebody else. But that I find that responsibility fun. I find that as an actor, my job is to come and enhance the story in one way or another, to provide a mood or a color or something that will either help the story arc or complement the story arc or come in at a particular energy to our lead characters. And sometimes it requires a kind of a sleight of hand. And if as an actor you're playing the sleight of hand, you're taking people's attention into an opposite direction. It's a fun thing to do, and it's not only horror movies. It can be westerns, it can be spy thrillers. It can be all sorts of things. I think that's a basic to storytelling that I actually quite enjoy. I feel like I'm taking people down the wrong path.
That's great. That's what movies are all about. Now you've gotten to work with many great directors throughout your career. Included in that list is Guillermo del Toro and George Romero. The movies were Mimic and Survival of the Dead, respectively. What stands out, let's say, with working with Romero? Is there anything that stands out with working with those two particular directors?
Both of them, their humanity and their relaxed nature. You would never think that when you see their films, you would think that they were like, really crisp, tense affairs, relying on, moments happening correctly. In fact, both of them were really, really easygoing, really kind, which is an interesting quality for somebody that is creating, often a lot of shock. But it goes back to what I was saying. I think that horror films are often places that are actually quite comfortable, and the horror genre is in a weird way comforting.
It is.
It actually helps us look at things in a slightly different way. So anyway, to get to George Romero, I worked on Survival of the Dead, which was one of his last films.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he would readily say that it wasn't one of his greatest films, not from his most creative period, but it had some moments of pure George that were just magnificent. And there were moments working with him where you realized that he knew exactly what he needed. There was one point where we burst into a room through a door. The scene started with a close-up of a boot kicking a door down, and then the gang rush through the door and rush in upstairs to see whether there are some zombie children chained to a bed upstairs. So we started shooting in the afternoon, and producers were getting a little uptight. Things were going slowly. The door didn't work. We couldn't get it jimmied in such a way that it would fall correctly. There were a few attempts, didn't work again. And the carpenters came in, tried to do something. Then somebody hurt themselves and went on, and people were running around. George, all the while, is just sitting there, completely relaxed. And then, people, the volume on set is going up and up. You can feel it rising. And George sits there and goes, "You know what, guys? We don't really need that door. Let's forget the door, shall we? The scene's not about the door." Completely calm, and everybody turns to him and goes, "Really? Yeah. The scene's not about the door. The scene's about when we get up the stairs. So why don't we just hear the door crash off camera?" And everybody goes, "Oh, wow." So it takes that confidence and that calm and that assurance to be able to sort of say, "Yeah, I know what this is about." And George, like a lot of really good directors, shoots to edit too. Knows that this scene is going to cut to the next scene, is going to cut to the next scene. You can see it in his head. He doesn't have to waste time on the wrong avenues.
Oh, I love hearing stories like that. And was this the only time that you got to work with George Romero?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Do you consider it an honor that before his passing you got to work with?
Absolutely. And we all did. That's the reason we all participated in the film. And also what was amazing was that people came from all over the world as zombies with their own zombie gear, and would come and stay in hotels, and knew that George was filming, and would arrive on set to be included in the movie. And there was that just worldwide respect and desire to be a part of anything that George did. And he just he was charmed and flattered, but in a very very engaging way, very modest, and he was always surprised at how much people passionately admired his work.
He sounds like a wonderful man. He was a wonderful man. Let's go back now to some earlier days. You trained in drama, theater, toured North America. What are some of your fondest memories when you were doing theater?
I've got many, and I still do. I am a theater actor by training, by experience. I've toured the world with theater. That's the reason I originally toured around England and Scotland, and then came to Europe, and then came to North America. I think it's working with a small group of people on one show for a sustained period of time really allows you to investigate the story that you're telling, but also you get to know intimately everybody else within it and all the component pieces. And I think it teaches you humility as an actor, where you go, okay, so telling this story, fun can be had when you're not on stage, but you're anticipating the moment that's coming 3 pages down the road. You just enjoy the rhythm, and you enjoy the ability sometimes not to be the focus of attention, but to be the support, to be the guy that comes in and makes somebody laugh and then walks off stage. There's a sort of a sense of an ebb and flow of your responsibility as an actor. But you never switch off. Like when the show is running, if you're off stage, you're behind the curtains, listening, ready, and part of it, and then 100% ready to go into it. And I think you can always tell theater actors when they're doing film, because there's a sort of an energy and participation that theater actors have. It's not better, it's not worse, but it's got a kind of an intensity and an all-purposeness about it.
Absolutely. Now, can you remember how the transition went from you going from theater into motion pictures? How did that come about? Did you want to, or were you initially at the start of your career, you would have been happy just being a stage actor?
I would have been happy being a stage actor, but I was married with kids, a pretty successful stage actor. I toured internationally, set up my roots in Toronto, in Canada, which was the center of theater, film, television, commercials, all kinds of things. And I really enjoyed it for that. But I was primarily a theater actor. And I realized that I could be involved in a number of different productions, different styles with different people. But I also knew that it doesn't pay the rent. I mean, and as you start to have kids, you do a 5-week run in a 200-seat theater, and you get a percentage of the box office, and it doesn't go very far. So what inevitably happened was I started to do commercials that were being shot. Toronto was a big center for commercial shooting, and so I would advertise a product during the day, and it would subsidize, and I would go to the theater and do more. And then because of the way I look, I tended to play the quirky guy, the jokey guy, the gag, or the guy that falls over and hits his head, So I started to enjoy it, and I started to learn how sets worked, how to play to the camera. And then I got a few roles in episodic TV shows, Guest of the Week and stuff. So it evolved. And I had to relearn too, just focusing on the lens, on the camera, on the size of the emotion that I'm expressing. So it was a gradual process. But after about 10 years, I realized that I'd flip-flopped, and I was doing probably 80% film and television and 20% theater. And now it's got to the point where I'm doing almost entirely film and television. I do the occasional theater show. But the reason I don't do theater, the only reason, is scheduling. It's just that theater operates on an entirely different level, in that you have to book 6 months, sometimes a year in advance to a play, and that play is going to tie you up for 3 months. And when there's a lot of exciting film and television projects coming up, it's very hard to commit to that without at the last minute saying, sorry guys, I've got another gig. I don't like doing that. So I miss it. I don't do theater so much, but it's very much a part of the way I approach character, even on film and TV. Even though I've adjusted and adapted to the camera, I think my process is quite theatrical.
Now, I've had a lot of guests tell me that have come from a theater background and they go into motion pictures, television, that they have to learn how to interact with the camera. So, as an actor, what would you say is the biggest difference performing for a camera as opposed to a live audience? What is, like, if you were giving advice to somebody who's up and coming, who's in theater right now and is about to do motion picture, what would be the one thing you would tell them?
For me, it's allowing the camera to find you and to discover you. In theater, there's a need to reach out and grab the last row of seats in the theater, to seize people's interest. The opposite is required in film. It doesn't mean to say that you have to make any different choices or be any less truthful in one medium or the other. It's just that you have to find a way of balancing it and making those discoveries. So one discovery is on the front foot, and the other discovery is more sort of keeping it to yourself and knowing where that viewer is watching you from, the viewer being the camera.
Yeah. Now, you were also in the very high budget film Man of Steel.
Yep.
Uh, being on a movie like that, it was Warner Brothers, right? It was a Warner,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
with such a huge budget. Explain to us as viewers and fans, what's it like to walk onto a set with such a big, enormous budget as opposed to something with a modest budget?
Well, it is something that I do a lot. And I mean, it is extraordinary, and it's exhilarating. Um, when I shot Man of Steel, it was the first time I'd ever gone onto a set and everybody handed their cell phones in. There was an aura of secrecy
Yeah.
around the thing. And oh, wow, this is so big, and yet we have to be so secret about the whole thing. That was kind of very exciting. I'd also never seen so much green screen in all my life. I mean, I walked into basically a hockey arena that was green screen. It was like wherever you looked. And in the foreground was some amazing set pieces and some architecture that we as actors were sat on. But obviously it was going to be painted in later on. And, the mind boggled at how much work had gone into creating this environment in green, let alone what was going to happen in post-production on top of the green screen. And also what was incredible was acting with people with tennis balls at the top of their head, and right, you have to look at the tennis ball. You don't look at the guy that's speaking, because when they CGI it, it will be the tennis ball that's speaking because the guy is 10 foot tall. Yeah. So you look up there, it's a reference point. And you go, all right, it's a reference point. And you just try not to look down at the guy that's actually speaking to you. There's all those sort of like technical adjustments, but really it's just the exhilaration of being on a big project. Yeah. I mean, it's exciting. It's sort of sexy. Looking at it from the other way, though, when you're on a small budget show, and I've done many independent films that have shot in 15, 18 days, there's a kind of a pragmatism and a DIY sass that kicks in that actually cuts corners, and it's not inflated, and it means that it's very pragmatic and equally fun. But it's hey, it's the grand opera. Yeah. It's fun, and working with people that are legendary. Russell Crowe, like yes. Hanging out with Russell Crowe, who is a larger than life person, yes. Not just actor, but an incredible actor. Person. Amazing, and a really great guy to be around. But he has an aura around him, right? Because we've created him as a sort of a superstar, and he carries it very well. But it's like, yeah, wow. And I had a similar experience. I did X-Men 3 as yes. well, which again, had that sense of size and. No problem. If it's a problem, we'll overcome it. We've got the resources, we've got the finances, we can do it. But in either case, I was very fortunate because I did scenes with great actors. Nice. Obviously Ian McKellen. It was a wonderful scene partner, and and I was very fortunate in Man of Steel too.
So when you go on these sets like Man of Steel and X-Men, like you said, it's a big, giant green screens everywhere. And then you do your scenes, you do your work, and then it comes time to see the final product. What is your impression when you sit down in the theater and you saw Man of Steel, the finished product, or X-Men, and you remember being on that set, you remember shooting your scene and seeing all the work that the editors, the special effects people have done with the CGI. As an actor, what is like the feeling that invokes in you seeing the final product?
It depends. You can feel very small. I
Hmm.
mean, you look at it and you know how much work you put in and everybody else around you, and you realize, it's all about the spectacle and the sound and the fury, and about people flying through the air and zaps of thunder and stuff. But it can also it's a double-edged thing. I'm also aware of movie magic, and I look at
Hmm.
it and I go, "Oh wow, I am a sprinkle of stardust within that music movie magic." I realize that it's gone from all those working bits that were sort of felt clunky and we were pretending with to this extravaganza, and it's magical.
It is magical.
Is the with the and always the addition of sound. I think that's the thing that always surprises me as an actor is when I see the finished product. I never have a soundtrack in my head.
Hmm.
I'm talking to you right now. We're talking back and forth, and I'm listening to what you're saying, but we're not accompanied by emotional music or
Exactly.
sound and fury and stuff. And so that always takes me by surprise, and particularly in something like Man of Steel, how grand it is, and through all the speakers in the movie theater.
And it's amazing to me how, uh, like you just said, it's such a vital element to any movie or TV show. But the soundtrack, because it's just so subconscious and it just equates into our experience as viewers, how it's just overlooked sometimes. Just to
Yeah.
bring up a great composer, Hans Zimmerman.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
the stuff that he's put
Yeah.
together has been phenomenal. Now, when you get a new script and
Yeah.
somebody say, "Hey, can you read this?" and would you be interested? Is there a particular thing you look for in a new script that's going to lead you to auditioning or taking the role as opposed to not taking the role?
No, reasons to take something or not vary hugely. Depends on the rest of the cast. The story might not be quite right, but it might feel like there's a great cinematographer that has a great eye, and he's going to invest something in there that you want to be a part of, or there's a topic, or you feel that it could shift and change as we do it. It really, I don't have a rule book of they don't meet this criteria, therefore I'm going to say no. And to be honest with you, sometimes it comes down to money.
Yeah.
It comes down to, hey, it's a job, and I think that looks like a good job, and maybe it's not the best this, that, or the other, but I think I'll take it. So there are many reasons, but new scripts. What do I look for? Freshness, vitality, originality, and maybe not being perfect. I mean, and maybe that's what I'm getting at as I'm rambling here. I'm getting
No,
at the fact
yeah,
that
this is
it
great.
doesn't have to be um, slick, and maybe that's sort of what I like sometimes is that within the process, those things can be either fixed or compensated for by counterpoint music, something that we discover, a spark between two characters that you didn't even know existed when you read the script, or a beautiful piece of scenic design that suddenly becomes emotional. Stuff like that. Like rough diamonds for me as scripts are much more interesting material than something that's a tried and true formula.
Yeah, like all the tropes and horror, like, if they get used too much, they lose their effectiveness in a way.
Yeah,
Now, we're starting to see the light at the end of this COVID tunnel, at least here in North America. I know
yeah.
other parts of the world are still being ravaged. Do you see the Hollywood landscape forever changed when COVID, years from now is in our rearview mirror, hopefully, and everything is sort of back to normal? Has it been forever changed?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, we know that the big players are getting bigger. We know that Netflix and Amazon and the streaming services now are mainly responsible for content. And COVID, during COVID, we haven't been going to see new releases live at the theater. I hope that that returns. The cinema going experience to me is, I just love it,
Yes.
and the idea that we premiere things on our small screens is very disappointing to me. I think that we have a need to go to the theater physically and to go back to that cycle of opening weekend and reviews and a sense of anticipation. And not seeing it in like 10 episode chunks, but going bang, there's that one incredible thing. So I'm looking forward to, I hope that that's going to return. I worry a little about independent film. I hope that I hope that with our technological change that there are outlets, there are independent horror movies, there are markets, there are festivals where the independents can keep producing and creating.
People don't realize, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but people just don't realize how important independent films are and what they contribute to the movie industry and just how important they are. There have been so many gems that have come from the independent circuit, working their way through film festivals, getting purchased, getting distributed. So many countless gems. And a lot of people who are not in the industry take it for granted that some of their favorite movies, were independent films.
And not received well at the time of their release. It's essential, and something that starts to happen is that when studios become savvy and kind of I guess very powerful, they start to produce fake independent films.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
and
do.
so that starts to be a problem where you go, wait a minute, no, that's kind of formulaic, and that's wearing the clothes of an independent film, but it actually isn't. It's like it's primary new colors. It's shocking new things. It's like I said before, rough diamonds, things that you go, what is that? I just don't get it. I don't understand it, but it's good, or it's worth, or it's not even good. I don't know if it's good, but it's worth watching.
Yeah.
And it's arresting, and it's not just being arresting for the sake of it. It's not just trying to shock me into watching it. It's just, but there's something about it. And it's that indefinable thing that is so important. And I think that's what comes from indie spirit.
Exactly. It's like the movie you watch, and for me, it's you wake up the next morning and you're still thinking about it. You don't know why, but it leaves an impression with you.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you, you have several projects, some completed, some in post-production, Compton Manor, Stanleyville, Salvation. Which ones or all of them are you most excited about that is going to be coming out?
I think Chapelwaite is an interesting film. It's a series. It's based on Stephen King's short story Jerusalem's Lot.
Okay.
That's Jerusalem's Lot, not Salem's Lot, but it precedes Salem's Lot. It's very much the same territory, the same kind of worldview. It was a short story written by Stephen King, and it's been adapted to a 10-part miniseries. Starring Adrian Brody and Emily Hampshire. Chapelwaite is the name of the haunted house that he inherits from his relatives. And I can't tell you much more than that, but it's going to be a fun show. It's going to be on Epix, which is MGM, which is now obviously with the shifting of the industry. I think it's now Amazon, but we'll see how that plays out.
I tell my viewers you're going to see a lot of mergers happening with the streaming wave.
I think so, yeah. But this is also one of those really interesting products that I think could be really quite good. I was lucky enough to film that during COVID in a bubble in the maritime bubble in Canada, where they were relatively unscathed by COVIDs,
Hmm.
and the protocols were in place to create a safe film environment. So we shot this entire series, and I think it would be really good.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to watch it. Julian, do you believe an hour has passed already?
Oh wow, no, that's
That
amazing.
was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all those stories. It's been an absolute honor. Any final thoughts you want to share with our audience before we say goodbye?
No, thank you for listening, and let's hope we all get through this soon. And I'll see you at the movies.
Absolutely. Julian, thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It's been a fascinating talk. Again, Julian, it's been an honor talking to you. Everybody stay safe. And until next week, stay walking. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.